Hello, everyone. It is another beautiful day here in Thurston County. My name is Rory Summerson, and this is County Conversations. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the homeless crisis that we're facing here in our region. We're going to talk a little bit about housing and affordability and some ways that you can connect and some additional resources for you. So what I like to do when I start these conversations is really, start it under this mind frame of I'm not the expert in everything. We don't really expect that our elected leaders are going to be experts in every single topic. My hope is that our commissioners, myself when elected, we're going to be deferring to the expertise of people who've been on the ground, who've done the work. And so what we're going to do is we're going to, like a lot of our other shows, we're going to have a special guest today. And that guest is Jessica Bateman, who is the mayor pro tem in Olympia and has extensive experience working with housing and homelessness issues. So with that said, Jessica, would you like to join us here and introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me and the opportunity to have a county conversation. My name is Jessica Bateman. I currently serve as the deputy mayor for the city of Olympia, and I'm running for the 22nd Legislative District, House seat, position 2. I've worked on homelessness and housing over the last 5 years pretty significantly. I co-led the Home Fund campaign with Phil Owen, the executive director of Sidewalk. I've also testified in the legislature for increased resources for cities to address homelessness and housing. And then on the city council, we've taken some pretty innovative steps to address homelessness and housing in our community. So I've been working in a couple different ways. I've also worked to increase housing options, which is related to the issue of homelessness, which I hope we can delve into. And I'm just happy to be here.
Awesome. And I'm glad you mentioned that some issues and wanting to talk around the issues of diversified housing options as well, because we do want to do some multi-part series. And this is one of those topics that I strongly feel is going to require a multi-part series so that we can get through the various topics relating to not only homelessness, but that diversity of housing options, but then also a lot of the local non-governmental organizations and nonprofits that deal with these issues. So there's definitely going to be a long, expansive conversation surrounding these issues. And so with that kind of lead in, why don't we go ahead and start talking specifically about some of the housing affordability issues that you've experienced so far in Olympia, and then extend that a little bit out into Thurston County, and I'll let you take the lead on that conversation.
Yeah, sure. So I think everybody knows that, prices continue to increase pretty dramatically, not only in our area, but around Washington state. And then we're also having an increase in homelessness. And I really think of it as a perfect storm because as we've had our population growth and a population increase, especially in high opportunity areas where there are jobs, we've also seen not enough housing being built. So for instance, in Thurston County, we anticipate our population projected growth to be 70,000 people moving to Thurston County over the next 20 years. And so one of the roles of government is to try to think about where are those people going to live and how are we going to orient our communities to accommodate that growth. It's actually a responsibility of our elected officials to plan for that. And of the growth that we're going to see over the next 20 years, in Washington state, 80% of it will occur in cities. You're seeing people migrating to where jobs are, basically. And so in Washington, we're 225,000 units of housing behind in order to keep up with our current population growth. And that number comes from a report by Up for Growth, which is a nonprofit that's focused on making sure we have enough housing for everyone. Right. And so when you have not enough housing, but you have a high demand for housing because you have people wanting to live there, you see the increased costs in housing. So at the same time, we haven't seen our wages keep up at the same rate. So that really is the perfect storm. And we also see when you have a $100 increase in rent, you can see a 15% increase in homelessness. And that was a report by Zillow. So we know that there's a relationship between increasing prices of housing and homelessness. And in Thurston County, 46% of our residents are cost burdened, meaning they're spending 46% of, or 46, over a third or over a third of their income on housing. If it's over a third, it's extremely cost burdened.
Well, so, and that's something, I'm glad you point that out, because this is something that I think a lot of people, especially in my generation, are really, really sensitive to. So wage stagnation, right? Or the idea of wage stagnation and not being able to keep up with it. I recently read a report that suggested that in the state, at least as a state total, our average wages should be, or our minimum wage should be closer to like $27 an hour if we wanted to keep up with the cost of median housing costs. And so, you know, obviously it's a little bit lower than that, maybe a couple of dollars lower than that is what we should expect in Thurston County. So really the discussion becomes is how do we get there, right?
Yeah.
And so,
well, and we absolutely need to increase wages for sure. And that number that I mentioned, 225, 100,000 units, if housing is the biggest part of a family's budget and housing prices are so high because we don't have enough housing to keep up with current population, we need to start with having enough housing, an adequate supply of housing first, or at the same time at least. But we do seem like we always focus on wages, which are absolutely important. And we kind of forget the fact that we also at the same time need to fight for increasing housing options for people. So that's kind of, when I talk about housing and homelessness, I always want to make sure we're talking about the fact that we also need to build housing. And I'll also say, having worked on a campaign for basically permanent supportive housing, which is for chronically unhoused folks, low barrier, best practice. You know, that was kind of a controversial topic, and it can be. And also building housing can be a controversial topic. People have different opinions about that. Yeah. But we can't have a real conversation about addressing homelessness or housing affordability without talking about both issues and also housing.
You know, I think that I'm really glad you point that out, because I've felt that a lot in the community here over this last year or two, having conversations about homelessness and housing, especially being down in the camps when I've gone down and spoken to people and that are down there currently in the unhoused camps. And then also with my work with Partners in Prevention Education as a board member, trying to understand the real dynamics here. And so, yeah, it's absolutely essential that we're talking about housing placements, rapid rehousing, and stuff along those lines, not just the wage aspects. But there are a lot of systemic problems that lead into these issues. You know, obviously there's some mental health concerns that leave people out on the streets. There are some, you know, some other health concerns, critical illnesses that chronic illnesses that leave people out on the streets. You know, we also see a disproportionately large number of young people that are out on the streets that are either LGBTQ or persons of color. And those are disparately impacted communities right here in Thurston County. We know that we've got over 38% of our unhoused population in Thurston is believed to be people of color. And we're looking at a minimum of 12 to 15% who self-identify as LGBT. But even within our own HCRP plan, which is the Housing Crisis Response Plan, there's not a lot of ability to track those metrics because there isn't a lot of questions related directly to those issues. And so those are things that we've got to start to address more holistically and in a trauma-informed fashion.
Yeah, you're right. And it's hard to, and I'm glad you cited the plan. We've gone through multiple iterations of that county plan, which the county leads. And it's experienced quite an improvement. So I know it's kind of daunting to look at, but it's a really good plan. Included in that plan is needing public dollars for permanent supportive housing, like the home fund.
Yep.
One challenge that we have is cities and counties not having enough revenue to provide housing, which I'll go into and talk about. Mm-hmm. But when you talk about vulnerable populations and marginalized populations and all those challenges you identified, you know, our current system, we're so behind in the units of housing that we have available that we're sheltering people. Like, for instance, in Olympia, we have a mitigation site downtown where people are literally just sheltering in tents because that's an improvement. Some people think it's an improvement. We also have our tiny house village, but what we really need to do, and the goal is like getting people into housing. So that's like the home fund. It's basically apartment style, single like studio apartment units. And there's actually new guidance, I believe, from the HUD or the CDC. I can't remember which one. I don't know why the CDC, must be HUD, that are actually talking about now they don't, for shelters that we build new have to really look more like apartments. They have to have like an individual shower, individual bathroom. And I'm glad they're focusing on that, because the best practice really is to just get people into housing. Right. And when we talk about, like you said, harm reduction, there should be no prerequisite for a person getting into a home. You know, if a person has a substance use disorder or a mental health condition, absolutely essential to getting any kind of help or having any kind of sense of normalcy is having a place to be safe and have your own home, which is
Exactly.
why I'm so proud of the Home Fund. And we're breaking ground later this year of
Yeah.
120 units of shelter and permanent supportive housing.
Right.
That was also a partnership. We were able to get Housing Trust Fund dollars from Representative Dolio's work, and then also leveraging with state and other grants. So I want to go back to the price of housing, just a
Yeah.
little bit of information.
Yeah.
So Thurston County now outpaces Pierce County in our average rent costs. We're at $1,200 a month for our average cost of rent, and the median home price in Thurston County is now $340,000. So that's kind of just some numbers and figures, and we have a very low vacancy rate. So we need to have, and we've been 600 units behind in housing. We have our targets and goals at Thurston County, and every year we continue to be behind by hundreds of units to keep up with population growth. So,
Well, and I think it's really interesting you mentioned that because, and kind of going back to the crisis response plan, just so everybody gets an idea of what we're talking about, it's literally this document right here. And it's good. It really is. There's a lot of data and metrics in there, but there are also some things that still need improvement. One of those things, for me at least, is this idea that while we're falling short, the metric that we start to begin with on units per year is still pretty low. It's the total goal is an increase of 100 units a year. And I would love to see that number be a lot higher than that. But above and beyond that, I also think that we look at other cities around the country and, cities here within our own county that have a lot of really great progress happening. So one example of that's not here local would be Rockford, Illinois. And they've specifically targeted veteran services and veteran placements, and been able to actually, with Target Zero, reduce their unhoused population to almost completely zero. But they started out with really high impact communities, disparately impacted communities, and dealt with those populations first. And then I also look at the 100,000 Homes campaign, and really what their metrics was building this NGO, which the non-governmental group collaborative effort, where all of the various nonprofits that work on these specific issues, all of the systemic issues and all of the housing issues, basically created a war room where they all come together and do strategic planning as a coordinated effort. And so we've got some of that foundation, that groundwork going on right now. But it's the one thing that I found was really interesting that seems to be a really effective thing is monthly reporting and monthly targeting. So like doing a percentage, a low percentage, to 2 to 2.5% targeting of people being placed per month. And so what that does is create a lot more community involvement in the topic.
yeah, so we currently have the Homeless Housing Hub of Thurston Thrives. It's our homelessness providers that meet monthly. We also have the Housing Action Team, which both of those groups were participants and partners in creating that plan. And then the data, if we could get real-time data to demonstrate on a monthly basis what our actual housing placement numbers are, and then how many people we have coming in, so we can see when we're getting level set, that would be ideal. And I think
that's what I want to have happen, because that's really, you need those data and metrics to make rapid changes in your plan when something's not working, or if a situation arises like an emergency, like a pandemic, like we're in now. If we don't have the metrics to really show what the process is and the progress is right now, then we're really falling short of our goals consistently.
Sure. So that's Built for Zero, I think, is the organization that you're referring to.
Yeah.
And you can actually become a member, and they will actually provide you with assistance and resources. And it would be great to have Thurston County lead on that, because some of the challenges of implementing real-time data are right now. So we have a coordinated entry system, and that is, every county is required to have one. Our lead organization of our three-pronged coordinated entry system, which is Community Youth Services for Youth, a Family Support Center for families, and then Interfaith. Interfaith Works or Sidewalk for single adults. But in community or family support center is our lead. So they collect the data and report it to the state. And it's the HMIS, Homelessness Management Information System. And it's kind of tricky to utilize and to look at. And then there's licensing, and it's really kind of archaic through our state system. And Built for Zero has a different system that is much more user-friendly and having the ability to actually see that real-time data. So that would be fantastic. What you need is a lead organization because it does require an investment financially and staff time. And we also need, which is one of, when we talk about solutions, the county has, well, homelessness should be treated like a public health crisis, right? Thurston County has the Department of Public Health. And you see this challenge with counties who are responsible for all the housing dollars coming in, having a different culture than the most urban city, for instance, in that county that generally has the highest population of unhoused folks. So then there's this tension of like the resources are coming into the county organization that has a different culture and a different idea maybe about how to address this issue. And then the community that's actually feeling it the most concentrated and them having a different culture. And then you combine that with the fact that there's all these different streams of housing dollars and they're all disconnected and there's no like combined holistic way of doing it. And it's having these really great nonprofits competing for dollars. There's no centralized like system or process. So I'm a big fan of Built for Zero. We've talked about it on council a little bit as individual council members, and it would be lovely, absolutely lovely to have a county commissioner that was focused on that and interested.
It's something I've been looking at here for quite a while. Obviously, the campaign's been around for quite a while, and I think the other campaign that I was mentioning, the 100,000 Homes campaigns, 2013, 2014 is when that started. So that one's been around for a long time too. And so we do actually show, in the data and metrics that they're very successful programs. And so there's not really any viable reason to not invest in it here locally.
Yeah.
So with that said, because I totally agree. We do need a more collaborative and coordinated system. Let's talk a little bit more about the mitigation sites and your experience with the mitigation site down there in Olympia and what you see as some added need in terms of mitigation.
Sure. So we've had our mitigation site for a couple years now. We've got at least 100 people there currently, and they have safe shelter. So everyone's provided a tent, safe storage. We have hygiene services. Storage is an important factor for folks that are unhoused, because if you don't have the ability to store your belongings, you end up having to take them with you wherever you go, and that can be a burden and a challenge. Immediately, once we had folks in there, we heard of people commuting to jobs, riding their bikes to jobs, getting access to services. Another challenge for folks is not having identification. So not having an ID, not being able to access state resources because you don't have an ID. Another challenge has been if you want to access different resources and finding out what you're eligible for, having to go to different state agencies or county agencies when you're on foot or you have to take a bus, and it's just this challenging process. So the community care center has been a great partner in providing a one-stop shop for people to decrease barriers for the most vulnerable folks, to bring services to them so they can literally just like try to fill out as many applications as they can in one spot, while they also get dignity services, laundry, shower, also having behavioral health and medical there at the community care center, which is right across the street from our mitigation site. We also have a tiny house village, Hope Village, which is managed by the Low Income Housing Institute, which is another great partner. And that is for folks that are a little bit more stable and ready to identify what their barriers of getting into housing are long-term. And then we've also got these faith-based organization partnerships where individual faith-based organizations are hosting tiny houses on their property and serving as a relationship building and community building process, which is really, really great.
Well, I think it's interesting you bring up that process specifically right there with the faith-based organizations that are hosting those units and those housing options. It's my understanding that they're the only organizations that are technically allowed to in some cases. Is that not the case? As far as organizations outside of like local agencies and government.
Yeah.
And so, I'm kind of one of those that like, I see the value there. There's an immense value of that community, and those organizations are strong partners in these issues. But I would also love to see more flexibility in people's desires and ability to actually serve in that same capacity, even if they're not faith related. So I think that there's also needing to have a discussion about how we can, adopt policies, procedures, and allowances for other nonprofit organizations who are not necessarily faith related to also participate in that process.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the county's is, and we've made we declared a homelessness state of emergency, and I believe the county has done that
Yeah.
as well. And a nonprofit could be eligible, depending upon the site, the location, and everything like that.
Right.
But historically, it's been only faith-based organizations, and historically, like in Olympia, you had to move every 6 months, which makes no sense at all.
Right.
So you changed that too. But I think the point is that we're so underfunded and lacking of resources that we need every single partner that we can get. And, having faith-based organizations is an incredible asset. And we've seen relationships be built. And if you're unhoused, having a community that you can feel connected to, a sense of camaraderie, support, that's a model out of Oregon. I'm totally not Coyote Village. That's in Olympia. Forgetting the name, but there was a really great model out of Oregon that we've kind of modeled that after.
Right. And, I think one of the things that I've been asked here recently is what do I envision the county doing in response to some of these concerns? And one of those things for me is actually adopting models like Olympia's model of having a mitigation site that's actually sponsored by the municipality, and having Thurston County sponsoring a mitigation site in the unincorporated area of Thurston County, so that we're not only alleviating some of the burden from the Olympia municipality, but also giving greater access for people who are not living in the downtown corridor region. And so there's something I've been really supportive of is additional mitigation options and an additional mitigation site in the county. And so I'm hoping to be able to advocate for things like that. I know that there's a dire need for it because there's, like you said, there's only so many dollars to go around, and it's a matter of how can we best suit the placement needs of the community. And a lot of that comes from, having more options.
Yeah. So we've had conversations about this between the municipalities and the county for a while now, and we were kind of on the precipice of having a location cited, and then that was paused.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and I'll fully acknowledge that there are challenges associated with citing a mitigation site. I mean, we're in downtown Olympia, and there was a restraining order to get us to stop our mitigation site because local businesses that were nearby thought that they would be, that it would be detrimental to their organization. That was overruled because we declared a state of emergency and we have the ability to do that. But there is a time limit on our state of emergency. But even our 2828 Martin Way, our first home fund site, when we first bought that with home fund dollars, we heard feedback from that community that they were very concerned about a potential homelessness camp or homelessness housing on that site. People have a lot of fears and concerns. So again, it requires communication, outreach. When we had our tiny house village, I went to a community meeting where I talked with parents that were very concerned about having unhoused people near their kids' school. And through the work that we did with partnering with them and bringing people in, one of the things that Lehigh does is they host weekly meetings where members of the community can come in and participate in that. And they open it up and they talk about what the code of conduct is and are very transparent. So we've had such success with Hope Village that members of that group, that community that were so concerned, ended up coming in and helping paint the houses when we built them, and have been just incredible supporters. So it is possible, but it is, and the county does have a different demographic than the downtown city of Olympia. So does Tumwater and Lacey.
Yeah.
And right now, Olympia is the only city in Thurston County that has any shelter beds.
Yeah.
So we have 800 people in Thurston County, according to the last point in time count, which is a dramatic undercount because we don't know how many people are actually, it's just the only way that we count currently, but it requires.
Well, I think you really hit something there with the underrepresentation of the actual numbers. And I think there's a lot of reasons for this. Obviously one of these reasons is that there's some systemic barriers in that people are concerned about self-reporting, or ending up in a situation where they're going to be facing some of the, historic traumas in their life and reliving some of those traumas. And so there has to be this approach of, and we briefly mentioned it before, but trauma-informed care. There has to be principles in place and processes in place to reassure these people that they're not going to be facing reporting, they're not going to be facing any undue barriers that we can alleviate for them, and making them feel safe to participate in that system. That's
and
really
they also have the right not to participate, right?
exactly.
Like, if you are unhoused and living your life outside and the challenges that you're experiencing doing that every single day, and someone walks up to you with a vest and a clipboard and says, "Hey, will you take a moment to answer some questions?"
Right.
I don't think it's unreasonable for a person to say, "You know what, I'm good. Like, I got enough going on today."
Exactly.
It does make it very challenging. And even if they do say yes, the county has done some amazing work in this year and last year to get out into unhoused encampments, but we're relying on people to come in and take them, or at the best case, going out and trying to find them. But who knows if they're there that day or if they've gone somewhere else. And it's just a really tough model for actually reporting. And so my point was 800, it's an undercount, but going off of that, we don't have enough shelter beds for all those folks in Thurston County, and all of the ones that we do have are in Olympia. We will not see an actual solution to addressing our homelessness challenge until we have enough housing, affordable housing, and shelter as well. Although I would say if we're going to build, we need to build affordable housing. So when I think about solutions, we absolutely have to have more affordable housing in high opportunity areas. So that's where jobs are. But that is a challenge because if you think about the cost of construction, those are areas where there's a high demand. So when you see people developing in those areas, they're developing market rate housing because that's what the demand is there. And the cost of construction is so high. They're like, I'm going to build to what the demand is, which is higher end housing. Right. So that is a conundrum because we will only have truly affordable housing if we subsidize it or if we build it and own it ourselves as public housing. Right. And either way, that requires government to get involved. So for instance, with Olympia, home fund dollars, that home fund project will be, it's the home fund dollars created, we purchased the land with that money. And then we did an RFP with the Low Income Housing Institute, combining that with Housing Trust Fund dollars and grants and private donations that they're fundraising for to create this project of 120 units. We sold that to them. And the deal is it has to be affordable housing for perpetuity. Right. Because we paid for it and we're the government, we could say that that's the requirement. Right. But if you don't have that funding, then you're just looking at a piece of land, for instance. Like we have a Boulevard Road piece of land. When we purchased Park, we took off 10 acres and we wanted to make that affordable housing. So we're considering doing an RFP. We already did that, and having a developer come in with a proposal of affordable housing. We can put the requirement in the RFP that it's affordable and then sell it. But you have to have the land first. So if you don't have the revenue, like a home fund, which I hope more communities will pass home fund like measures. And actually, when we passed the home fund, we had to go to the people to get that passed. But now, thanks to Beth Dolio, actually, there was a bill, got on a different piece of paper, the bill number, but now city councils can pass that with a council vote. Yeah. And they can actually raise the sales tax for affordable housing. So that's a lot more pragmatic of an approach. Right. But if you don't have that revenue, cities do have land that they're not using. Counties do too, and so does the state. So taking a look at what the best use of that land is and potentially doing an RFP with the requirement that it's affordable housing. And if you combine that with impact fee reductions, you can actually start getting that cost down enough to where the developer can come in and say, okay, I can do this and it actually can be more affordable. Other opportunities are like micro housing, really shrinking down the footprint and combining things like bathrooms to make it pencil out to be affordable. Or, like the Housing Authority of Thurston County, when they own it, develop it, manage it, that's truly affordable housing. Unfortunately, it's just such a small amount. Yeah. So ideally, we would have communities all over Washington state doing this.
Well, I definitely agree. We have far too little of a pool for subsidized housing in the county as a whole, and I would love to see the county investing in more affordable housing options through the housing department. You know, one of the things that I think is really interesting that you'd mentioned is micro housing, because I think that that's something that we could easily incentivize and create a process that's really streamlined and easy for applications, not necessarily for large developers, but also for smaller developers, and really creating a pathway that works for them in the county, rather than just in the municipalities themselves. There are great locations within unincorporated Thurston that are very close to transportation corridors and work corridors, that would be really beneficial to have micro housing and you know, mitigation type of options available. And so I think that the county needs to obviously be looking at how we can incentivize and create options for micro housing. We need to look at diversified housing, and we need to look at how we can use the housing authority to increase what's publicly available right now. And those are all discussions that I think kind of get put to the side because there's not really a lot of incentive or desire for some of the current people in the position to want to have that discussion or actually force change there. You know, it's something that I would want to bring to the table myself, being elected, would be is really spearheading that conversations. One of the biggest pillars of my platform is really providing a pathway to address and create solutions for this. And so, you know, I like we've both said, we could talk about this for hours and hours and hours, but let's go ahead and dive into what you think some additional opportunities might be here in the region, and kind of use that as our wrap up for this particular segment.
Okay.
We'll
do another segment on solutions because I got
we're gonna have to. Yeah, we're gonna have to. Well, and obviously, go ahead and incorporate some possible solutions in the opportunities area if you like.
Sure. So I think, well, affordable housing tax credits are definitely an opportunity, but we need more work to find out. Like, for instance, in Olympia, we have a property tax credit, and only one project has actually utilized that in all the years that it's been available. So figuring out why developers aren't actually using that.
Right.
Investing wholeheartedly and robustly in our coordinated entry system. One part of that prong is rapid rehousing, which is a very cost-effective tool. For instance, if you lose your home and you have a family member that's out of state, Sidewalk can connect you with, or the new coordinated entry provider can connect you with funding to get a plane ticket to get there, if that's what the barrier is. Or if you want to be here and you just need a couple months rent in order to get back on your feet, they can do that too. But we also need to invest more heavily in it so we can actually prevent, because once a person becomes homeless and has been on the streets, it's much more expensive.
Yeah.
Leadership and streamlining from Thurston County. We've seen a significant improvement in the last couple of years, especially with County Commissioner Ty Menzer on there. But we definitely, you know, we look to the county. That's where all the funding comes through. And there's just been this continual challenge. We're not alone with the cities working with the county. And we really, especially when it comes to something like homelessness, we need one entity to be like, this is the direction we're going in. We've got guidance from the Department of Commerce. We know what we have to do. We have a plan. How do we get it accomplished? How can we work together to do it? Right. Investing in hygiene services and peer outreach, which the county is currently doing they've got a really great homelessness coordinator that knows best practices. More faith-based partnerships. That's something I think that there would be a lot of actual investment from county residents and excitement about. Also investing in shelter at the state level and HEN, rent assistance, the Housing Trust Fund, and the state investing more in permanent supportive housing. Currently, there are only like 1,000 units funded in this last budget for permanent supportive housing, and we could fill those in Thurston County
alone. Yeah.
And then I just want to go back real quick. You mentioned subsidized housing. So currently in Washington, we have 104,000 units available of subsidized housing, but we have 559,000 households that are eligible.
Yeah.
So we have 455,000 more units that we need. Those are not getting built. So those are some of the solutions that we need.
Yeah.
For folks that want to get more involved or learn more, I mean, this is kind of a big topic.
Yeah.
One really great organization is the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance. You can go to their website, you can get connected with their legislative advocacy, and they will call upon you during the session to come in and talk about all the different solutions that they're identifying, and they're very effective.
Right.
Also, a local group, which is focused on diverse housing options, is Olympians for People-Oriented Places. They're a great resource. And then you can volunteer or donate to members of our coordinated entry system. So Interfaith Works, our only single adult shelter that is low barrier in Thurston County. They're incredible. They need help. Sidewalk, which is amazing. Family Support Center, Community Youth Services. And then for resources for people, Up for Growth, I mentioned the number of units we're behind. Check them out. The Department of Commerce, and then Thurston Regional Planning Council, which has really great data on some of the projections, also vacancy rates, homelessness, what cities are doing to incentivize housing, kind of the challenges that we're experiencing. Another element of building in cities is you're reducing sprawl, which is also an added benefit and part of our comprehensive plan in Olympia, and I'm assuming in the county as well, because
Yeah,
you want to preserve rural areas for.
we do. We
Yeah.
do. Well, and, obviously that's an environmental concern as well as just an access concern, an actual access concern. So that's kind of a two-pronged issue in and of itself. And I think that I really wanted to express that I appreciate that you brought a lot of those resources to the forefront. We in our video streams, in the descriptions below, we do include a lot of the links that we discuss in our videos. And so I will get these the additional revenue or the additional sources that you mentioned put into the description as well, and in addition to the ones we have already listed, because we do have some down there in the description below. Below you'll also find, because Jessica is an LD22 candidate. Yep. And so, definitely look more into Jessica and her history. Look into a little bit more into Jessica's race is what I would tell the people watching. But then also check the additional links that are down there in the description as well. And we will make sure that we've updated those links by the end of the day today to include some of those additional resources. But again, if you go to the Thurston Regional Planning Council's website, it's www.trpc.com. We'll get you to their landing page, and on the landing page, it also has some resources listed on the sides of the page. And then if you go to the homeless section that's on there, it also has a lot of those same resources listed. So if you're itching to get those before I get them in the description, that's where you'll find some of those. So again, Jessica, thank you so much for being on today and informing the county residents about what some of our challenges are and what some possible solutions are. It's absolutely imperative that people in my position and all throughout the county are really listening to the people that have the experience on the ground. And so I appreciate your time today, and thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for the opportunity. It was great. I look forward to doing it again.
Awesome. So again, everybody who's watching, I really appreciate your time today. I'm glad you joined us for County Conversations. As you know, we talked a little bit about the homeless response and crisis that we're facing in the area, some local resources and departments and things that are addressing these concerns right now, what some of the current planning is, some of the timelines. The last words for me would be, I would really love us to be looking at some of our biennium planning, incorporating a lot more rapid response. I would love to be incorporating a lot more options in terms of making sure that there's collaborative work going on. I would also love to see organizations that are dealing specifically with some of the systemic issues in the health arena. Department of Health, Thurston County's Department of Health needs some modernization in terms of their management practices, and how we enable localized leadership on certain issues. And so I think that there's a lot of discussion that can be had around those to help address some of our housing and homelessness concerns. We are going to have next weekend another representative from Partners in Prevention Education on to speak more specifically about the members of our unhoused communities that are disparately impacted. We're going to hopefully have a really healthy, in-depth discussion about the metrics and the groups of people that Partners in Prevention Education services as a contracted nonprofit in the area for the county, dealing with outreach and advocacy during the pandemic. And so, the final word on the pandemic is that, a lot of our current concerns are exacerbated. And really what we need to be doing is looking at mechanisms by which we can reduce that impact from the pandemic in ways that are sustainable going forward, because we know we're going to have a lot of budget challenges. So I hope that you'll tune in with us next Saturday while we speak with the Executive Director of Partners in Prevention Education. And if you have any questions at all, you can reach out on my website. It is www.voterory.com. There's a question box right there on the homepage that you can send a question to the campaign at. You can send an email to info@voterory.com. You can find me on Facebook. My campaign page is facebook.com/Rory Summerson. And all of those links will be provided for you down below as well. And so I hope you continue to follow along and you join us in our next stream. And I look forward to chatting with you at our next county conversation.